Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining MyBird's webinar on waterfowl identification. We'll be starting in just a few minutes. Welcome everyone. We appreciate you joining this webinar. We will be starting momentarily. Please send your questions or comments through the chat box. Introduce yourself and your location. All right, well, I think we'll get started. So thank you again, everyone. Welcome to MyBird's webinar on waterfowl ID. We know everyone has a really busy life and really appreciate you spending the next hour and a half with us. We're hoping this webinar will be particularly helpful because we know people are spending more time outside and continuing to connect with nature closer to home. A few housekeeping items before we get started. First thing, my name is Erin Rowan and I am the Senior Conservation Associate for Audubon Great Lakes and Michigan DNR. I will be your facilitator for today's presentation along with Sarah Halson from our partners at Detroit Audubon, who will be facilitating our Q&A and monitoring the chat box. This presentation is being recorded. All participants will be muted for the duration of the webinar. To send a question or comment to the facilitator, please use the chat box. If you need tech support, please message MIBirds. If you're not joining us on the webinar and are only on the phone, please email your questions to me at mibirds@audubon.org. Questions will be answered by speakers at the end of the presentation. If you're joining us on Facebook Live, please enter your questions or comments in the comment section below. We'll be monitoring the chat box throughout this webinar, so please be respectful and appropriate while participating. We will review the questions you've submitted in the chat box during the Q&A at the end of the presentation. Today I'm joined by Brittany Like, the program coordinator with the River Raisin Institute, and Chris Sebastian, the public affairs coordinator with Ducks Unlimited for the Great Lakes and Atlantic region. We'll be chatting with you all today about all things waterfowl. And again, my name is Erin Rowan. I am the Senior Conservation Associate with Audubon Great Lakes and Michigan DNR, and I manage the MyBirds program, MIBirds program, which aims to increase all Michiganders' engagement in the understanding, care, and stewardship of public lands that are important for birds and people. I wanted to chat with you all a little bit about winter birds and birding in general. So winter doesn't necessarily seem like the best time to get out and go bird watching because we all think, didn't most of our birds just fly south for the winter? It's too cold. But it's actually a really great time in Michigan to go birding. Not only do we have birds that stay here year round, but we're also visited by northern species like northern finches, like the pine siskins here, that have really descended upon our backyards and bird feeders this winter. It's a big eruption year for these birds. But we also get to see some northern owls, like snowy owls, as well as boreal owls, visit us in the UP and Northern Lower Peninsula. And And it's also a really great time of year to go viewing waterfowl or ducks and geese. And we can see them in the hundreds of thousands, which is one reason Michigan birding and waterfowling in general, it can be so spectacular. So Michigan is really special in that it lies at the intersection of two migratory flyways. So we lie at the intersection of the Mississippi Flyway and the Atlantic Flyway. And these are migratory superhighways that bring billions of birds through the region. And fall can be especially great during fall migration in Southeast Michigan. We get a ton of raptors and other songbirds moving through, trying to avoid crossing the Great Lakes. So a lot of birds are going through Michigan along the coastline, and we've seen these migratory hotspots even on radar, which is really exciting. But a lot of these birds also end up staying here throughout the winter, and winter is one of my favorite times, also known as Weird Duck Time. This is one of my favorite Bird and Moon comics. I highly recommend if you are a bird nerd. She does a lot of great birding comics. But what are waterfowl? So we're chatting about waterfowl today. They are ducks and geese and large aquatic birds that are also commonly game birds. And one of their identifying features is these large webbed feet. There are some other birds that have webbed feet like common loons, and then lobed feet like pied-billed grebes, as well as common gallinules, but those birds aren't quite waterfowl. So keys to waterfowl ID. When you're out in the field, it's really similar to when you're trying to identify other birds in your backyard or warblers. You're looking at things like the range of these birds, the habitat that they require or might be found in, and migration timing. Are these birds that stay in Michigan year round? Are they here just during spring or fall migration, or are they here during the summer? You also want to look at flight behavior. Are they taking off vertically or more horizontally? Are they beating their wings faster or less frequently? And then what their foraging behavior is like. Also looking at the size, shape, and posture of the bird is really important. Bill shape as well, hind toe, if you can spot it, and leg placement. Bill color, eye color, and plumage color are also things you'll want to take note of. And today we're mostly talking about ducks. We're not really going to be chatting about geese or swans, but we are talking about dabblers and divers, these two groups of ducks that are very common throughout Michigan during the winter. And the key characteristics of dabbling ducks, these are ducks like mallards and wood ducks photoed here. They're surface feeding birds. They're often found in shallow water as opposed to deep water and marsh or forested habitats. And that is their key dabbling feeding behavior. It's great for the mallards too, which this is here. You can see that curled tail feather. So if all you can see is a butt and you manage to spot that, you know you're looking at a mallard. And key characteristics of divers that, as the name would suggest, they dive to feed. So this is a lesser scaup that's just dove down to go after some food. They're also found more so in deep water in our lakes, rivers, and reservoirs. Canvasback, another diving duck. Other key characteristics of dabblers are the leg position, which we mentioned. Their legs are positioned more so in the middle of their chunky bodies, which really gives them an ability to walk on land pretty comfortably. They might waddle, but they can really get around well on foot. They also have this iridescent speculum that you can see in the wing there, and they take off vertically, as you can see in this photo. Diving ducks, on the other hand, have their legs positioned towards the rear of their body. This makes it very difficult for them to walk on land, and actually during migration, sometimes they land on wet asphalt thinking it's a body of water and manage to get stuck there because they require to run in the water before they take off. They have a more horizontal takeoff, and they also have very little iridescence. Silhouettes and shapes of the birds are also really important. This is a resource that we can provide to you as a follow-up to this webinar. So just to keep in mind, noticing how high up the bird is sitting on the water, as well as the shape of that head, as far as the silhouette goes, the size, looking at that bill shape as well is very important. And then what these birds also look like in flight. And with that, I'm going to pass things over to Chris Sebastian, who's going to go into dabblers in more detail.
Thank you, Erin. Hello, everybody. I'm glad you're all joining us today. On a snowy day here in Michigan. I see some folks from across the Great Lakes region too, so that's pretty exciting. We're going to be talking about dabblers today, and specifically dabbler species that you're going to find here in Michigan. So there are some other species you might find on the West Coast or further south, but if you're not going to have really much of a chance to see them, we're not going to focus on those today. As Erin mentioned, because we are in the intersection of these two flyways, we have some pretty neat opportunities to see a better variety of ducks than other people might. During certain weather conditions like drought in the prairies, or during heavy winter storms in New York or in the East Coast, we'll actually get birds coming through our area here that we wouldn't normally see. So some pretty good opportunities. For these slides here, we're going to be obviously talking about the main characteristics of the ducks, but we're going to go a little bit beyond that. We're going to get into some behavioral patterns, some different lifestyle habits that some of these ducks have. That'll really help you to identify them, because they hardly ever look that pretty and that close to you, as you can see in this picture right here. They're going to usually be far away, or they're going to be flying above your head. You might just hear them in the background. So we're going to give you a couple different ways to identify those. And we're going to start out with everyone's favorite, everyone's most common duck, the always popular mallard. Great Lakes mallards, one of the most plentiful ducks, and they have the most extensive breeding range of any duck in North America. They're larger, so they're going to be about 25 inches long for the males and about 23 inches for the females. Obviously, the large green head here really makes these mallards stick out to everybody. They're iridescent. They really shine in the light, and they really are beautiful birds. They're big and they're gorgeous. You can see there the white ring on the neck also helps to separate it. If you do see some other ducks out there who do have some green on their heads, that white ring on that neck will help to identify that. The speculum, which is the feathers there on the bottom of the wing, they're violet blue, and they kind of are bordered by black and white. So that contrast really can help you to set those apart too. For these slides, and I do believe that Brittany with the diver ducks will tell you the same, we're going to be focusing mostly on the males here, because as you're going to notice from the descriptions, females are brown. They are brown, they're brown, they're brown. And then there's some more brown to them as well. This is important for nesting behavior. It does help to camouflage these ducks when they're nesting. So waterfowl ID with females is pretty difficult. So we're going to focus on the males for now, and then we can dig more into females on your own time. The mallards, you can see in this locator map on my slides here, you're going to see 3 different regions highlighted: the breeding and the wintering range that they're going to be in, and then also where they're going to be found year round as well. So as you can see here in this map, mallards are everywhere. They're always around. Many of them stay here in the Great Lakes as well. Some things to keep in mind for this: flight is not particularly rapid, so their wing beats are not super fast. They're not super fast flyers. So that's one way to ID them from the air, perhaps. I think you guys all know mallards, so we're going to move on to the next slide. Northern pintail. These are some of my favorites personally. They're gorgeous creatures. They're long, slender ducks with long, narrow wings. And these actually have the nickname Greyhound of the Air for that reason. They're long, they're fast, they're pretty. They have these long central tail feathers that you can see there in both those pictures. And actually for the drake, which is a male duck, it constitutes about 1/4 of his whole body length is that feather alone. slightly smaller than mallards. They've got this beautiful brown head there, and it's a really nice bird. In flight, you're going to see the drakes, the male ducks. They have an iridescent greenish black speculum on their wings that'll be displayed that can really help to identify those. Males also whistle in flight, and females have kind of a coarse quack. So not all ducks quack. In fact, a lot of male ducks do not quack. They will whistle, and that's something to keep in mind too. You can go onto a couple different websites and hear what these birds sound like as well, including ducks.org on our website, and get an idea of those. Northern pintails are among the first ducks to migrate south in the fall, and then come back north in the spring. So they don't like the cold. They get out of here pretty fast, but to see them, they are pretty gorgeous. They were once one of the most abundant ducks here in North America, but for some reason their numbers are declining, and we're still trying to figure out from a science standpoint why this population of ducks is not doing as great, and we're working on that. But you can see them here in the Great Lakes pretty frequently. And then next slide. The Gadwall. So Gadwall, unlike the pintail or the mallard, Gadwall are just pretty plain looking guys and girls. They're still pretty. They're smaller. They're about 21 inches long for the male, about 19 for the male. And we actually characterize them as general lack of bright coloration. So there's more of a drab looking duck. The male here has a grayish body. The bill is slate gray. As you can see there, it's darker. The white wing patch. Female, again, a mottled brown body. Its bill is going to be orange though. So that can kind of help tell you apart between the male and the female there. In flight, so something to keep in mind in flight, they fly swiftly. They're fast birds, and they have very compact flocks as well. And they usually fly in a straight line with pretty rapid wing beats. So that's something to keep in mind as we look at some more ducks here in the future that fly erratically. These don't. They pretty much know where they want to go, and they make a beeline, and then they go. These ducks also, the males will whistle, and the hen quacks, similar to a mallard, a little bit quieter. So that's some things to keep in mind while you're listening to them. Gadwall are pretty good numbers population-wise. They're not super common here in the Great Lakes. You can see them, but they do have a healthy habitat. And as you can see there, they winter in those areas in the south pretty extensively. Okay, next slide. The Widgeon. Widgeon is a similar size to a Gadwall. So sometimes they can get confused from some people. But some things to keep in mind is the bill, right? So the bills here of these widgeons are blue, and the heads there are really pretty. They've got the green hood and a little white spot there on top on the males. So if you see a duck about this size, those are some things to keep in mind. That would be the difference from the Gadwall, which would be the blue bill and then the green head and the white top. Females there also have, again, they're more brownish again. Feet on the female are blue-gray to dark gray. These widgeons nest farther north than any other dabbling duck, and they also get there pretty early as well. When you see these out there in the water, they're nervous birds, so they are pretty quick to take flight if you get too close or if they see some disturbance nearby. And their flights are irregular and fast, so they take lots of twists and turns. They've actually been described as pigeons in some ways, the way they fly. These drakes also whistle as one of their calls. So again, the main difference here between these and the Gadwall, which are similar size, is they fly different and send more colorings on there as well. So go to the next slide, please. Green-winged teal, these are pretty common birds here in the Great Lakes, and they're really pretty. So these are small. They're actually the smallest of the North American dabbling ducks, and they've got a short neck and a small bill. So if you remember those pintails with the long, elegant necks, these guys are more like a football player, right? They got these short, sturdy necks, and Their heads are really, really gorgeous. They got the iridescent green patch extending from their eyes to their neck. The bill is a dark slate color, and they have a bright green speculum there. Females, they have a brown line that extends from their bill through their eye. So female green-winged teals are also pretty identifiable in that way. They've got some pretty good characteristics on their face that can help you to identify them. Because they're small, they have the appearance of flying fast. So they actually look like that they zip through the air pretty fast. Mallards actually do fly faster than these guys. They do fly fast, but they're not the fastest. They usually go low and erratically over a marsh. They'll twist and turn as a group. So if you're out there at a marsh looking at something and you see this tight group of smaller birds kind of dipping and diving, going by you pretty fast, there's a good chance that they are green-winged teal. These populations are very strong here. They're a healthy population of species of bird here in the Great Lakes. And they really are pretty common in their good-looking birds. Next slide. Blue-winged teal, it is what it says it is. They've got blue wings, right? So these are also teal. They're also smaller, just like their green-winged teal cousins. And aside from the blue wings, you see that white spot, the white line in front of the eyes there of the male. That really helps you to notice right away what this is. They're pretty unique in that aspect. Their iridescent green speculum blends really well with the blue-gray on the wings too. Their legs are yellowish to orange for the men. For the ladies, it's more of a dull yellow brown. So that's one way to tell those apart. They fly in a similar way to green-winged teal. So they're going to have a twisting, turning flight, makes them look pretty fast as well. They also fly low over the marshes, and they do leave our region pretty soon. What makes these a little bit different might help you to identify these is they're more vocal than most of the ducks out there. So they've got a high-pitched peeping and like a nasal quacking that is mostly common during spring migration. So as you're out there and you hear those kind of unique sounds, there's a good chance that it might be a blue-winged teal. These numbers are also healthy. They've increased because of pretty good prairie breeding conditions up there in Canada and the northern U.S. Next slide. The American black duck, as you can see here on the map here of their range, these are really an Atlantic flyway species. These have a renowned history on the East Coast among waterfowlers. They're called the king of waterfowl out there in New York and along the East Coast area. They're bigger ducks. They're very similar to mallards. They're about 22 inches long. They resemble the female mallard in their coloration. So these aren't necessarily the brightest or most distinct looking bird color-wise. You can see their plumage is a little bit darker. They've got the violet blue on their wings there, to kind of help tell them apart. The male's head is slightly larger than the female's. But in flight, kind of a nice way to be able to ID these is in flight, their underwings, which you can't see in these pictures here, but the underside of these wings are white and contrasts pretty strongly with the rest of their body. So if you see a mallard-sized duck going overhead and you see this big contrast between the white and the dark, it's a good chance that's going to be a black duck. They're also pretty wary. So black ducks will take flight pretty quickly if you get near them. Their flight is also pretty swift, and they fly in smaller, tight flocks. They sound like mallards too. The hens quack, and the drake does a queak kind of sound to them. On the East Coast, there's been some actually interbreeding between mallards and black ducks as well. So you do have some hybridization as well. So you might see some of those. It's just one more way to make you sharpen your ID skills out there in the field. They're great birds, but they do resemble mallards a lot. Next slide, please. The wood duck. This is another popular one here in Michigan and kind of all over the place. So wood ducks are very, very common here in the eastern half of the US. And they're also, for many people, some of their favorite ducks because of how they look. Wood ducks are gorgeous. They've got that crested head with colors all over the place. You know, they got green and purple with some white striping. Their eyes are red, which is very unique. The bill also has black, white, and red in it. And even the females make it easy to identify them as well. They've got that white eye ring around their eyes there on their face. So those are pretty distinct birds. They're very, very colorful. They're really pretty. If you note there also, there's a squarish tail when they're in flight. Wood ducks are kind of neat because they rely on wetlands. They need marshes, but they live and they perch in trees. So tree cavities is where they live. They eat acorns directly from the ground, and that's something that people don't often consider as a duck eating an acorn, but they do. They fly pretty directly. They don't kind of fly erratically like some of the teal do, and they do stick into small flocks. What's cool is because they live in trees and wooded areas, they're amazing flyers. They can fly through trees and dense forest with ease, and it's pretty neat to watch them flying around. And they make a swooshing sound too when they fly. So, Aaron mentioned the wing or the sounds that they make when they fly. That's one characteristic of this is a swooshing sound. Because of the good population around here, or the good habitat around here in Michigan, especially with the mixture of woods and wetlands, the numbers are pretty good here. We have a lot of year-round residents. If you want to see these up close, there's a couple places here in southern Michigan that I can pretty much guarantee you will see them. Kensington State Metro Park always has a couple of pretty wood ducks hanging around. But then the Detroit Zoo as well. The Detroit Zoo has a really nice wetland boardwalk you can go through, and there's always wood ducks hanging around in there too. One last point for wood ducks is these are great birds for backyard conservation, right? So if you want to make a wood duck box, if you live near a marsh, we have plans on our website on ducks.org that you can use to actually create wood duck boxes that they rely heavily upon in some areas. It's a great way to see these birds up close and kind of have a hand in conservation. All right, next slide, please. This is a unique bird, the northern shoveler. I like them because they have big noses like I do, so that's fantastic. They have the spoon-shaped bill, which kind of widens toward the tip, and it creates a unique shape among waterfowl. They've got some pretty iridescent green heads, and they have a yellow eye, which sets them apart for some other dabbler ducks as well. They feed with these beaks, kind of neat how they do it. So they will dabble and they'll sift in shallow water, and they eat seeds from a lot of different types of wetland vegetation. And they consume it by filtering water, taking them into the tip of that bill, and they jet it out to the base of the bill. So it's kind of like this big filtration system. They fly directly and steadily, so they don't fly erratically like some other birds do. But when they're startled, they can kind of twist and turn around like teal for the most part. But for the most part, they fly pretty directly. They're a medium-sized bird, a little bit less than 20 inches, and they can be found here certain times of the migration cycles, both spring and fall. And that's it for the dabblers, I do believe. I will say this, Aaron, that dabblers are neat because they give you a chance to see something more up close. Some of the diver ducks that Brittany will be talking about, they're incredibly amazing birds, but they like to hang out on the big water. So not only do you have to get to the big water, you have to be able to see them far away on the big water in large rafts. Dabblers give you a chance to kind of sneak up on a marsh somewhere, hide behind some vegetation, and just see what comes in and out. So be patient and bring your Waterfowl ID books with you and some binoculars, and you won't be disappointed. We have a lot of great chances here in Michigan to do that.
Thanks so much, Chris. And yes, everyone, we do have a Dabbler ID quiz for you after Chris's overview of those dabbler duck species. So we will be sending out a poll to you all to see what you think this duck species is. So hopefully you can see that soon. Is the poll coming up?
I see some guesses.
Yeah, some guesses are coming in the chat. Let's see if Emily, perhaps maybe I can send the poll out myself. Hold on. There you go. All right, so we're gonna give folks a chance to respond and then we will close out the poll and see the results. Another few seconds there. Great. All right, ending the poll now. Great job, everyone. This is the American black duck. So this species can sometimes be confused with the mallard because they are very similar, a female mallard, of course, but looking at that speculum, hang on a second there. Looking at that speculum there that has that iridescent blue purple, like Chris was talking about, we see those black edges. There's not a white edge, which you can also see on a mallard outside of that speculum, but we do know because of hybridization, that could still be something that trips you up. Some hybrids do have both the white and black edges around that speculum. All right, great, everyone. We'll end the poll now and share the results. So yes, a mallard. This is everybody's favorite waterfowl, as Chris was mentioning, and it's one of our most prolific here in Michigan. So I'm not surprised that you all got this one correct. All right. We'll get this one going. Wait a few more seconds for folks to respond. All right, great. So yes, it looks like most of you got this one correct, and I see American Widgeon was our other option here. American Widgeons have that white on the cap and then a green cheek patch or face patch, or hood, I should say, on their face up to their head as well. So for the blue-winged teal, you really want to look for that white crescent on their face. That is their defining feature of the males. And then we can't see the blue wing patch when the bird is not in flight. Well, it's just in these photos. Sometimes you can spot some of the blue while they're just swimming as well. But good shot, everybody. We've got one more for you. Has the slide advanced? Mine, it looks like it's frozen on my end.
Yes, it is frozen, Erin.
There we go. Sorry, everyone. We'll relaunch that poll. Great, lots of responding. Folks, wonderful. So yes, you've got this one correct. This is a green-winged teal. You can see that green speculum in the wing, which really helps in this picture. You won't always be able to see that necessarily while they're swimming, but you do see this lovely chestnut head and this green patch on the face, and that is a key characteristic of these green-winged teals. And this is actually our final quiz question for you. Is this the Gadwall, the American Widgeon, the green-winged teal, or the northern shoveler? Wonderful. Great, everyone. You got this one correct as well. As Chris was mentioning, the Gadwall are both male and female, a little more drab in coloration, but they are still very beautiful birds. As you can see, the level of detail in this photo allows us to see some of those finer colorations on that wing. But one of their key characteristics for the males are that dark rump and that white wing patch that you can see there. And those are things, that black rump especially, is something you can see from a distance using your binoculars or a scope. And with that, I'm going to pass things back over to Brittany, who's going to delve into the diving ducks of Michigan.
Hi, everybody. So as she said, to reintroduce myself, my name is Brittany Like. I'm the program coordinator for River Raisin Institute. We're based out of Monroe, Michigan. So if you want to move on to the next slide, Erin. So I'll be focusing on diving ducks. So as it is has been mentioned earlier in the presentation, for the diving ducks, it is actually really common. It's more often that you will find them on larger, deeper bodies of water, hence the diving ducks. And with that in mind, as Chris mentioned, it is really hard to see them. It's unlikely you will see them up close. And so with that in mind, I am hoping to focus mostly on the identifying features you would see from a distance that you'd want to focus on. So here you'll see kind of an overview of the species I plan to go over today. So Erin, if you'd like to go to the next slide. So first off, I wanted to talk about the common goldeneye. What's kind of funny is their name implies common goldeneye, but there's a lot of species that have yellow eyes. So it's not necessarily a distinguishing feature for this bird in particular. They are frequently seen here in Michigan. They will overwinter and breed in Michigan, but more breed in the northern parts and then overwinter more in the southern parts. But for this species in particular, what I would say you would want to look for whenever you're going to ID this bird out in the wild is that nice bright white spot between the eye and the bill. The other area you would want to look at is that the red line pointing towards the black and white wing area. It's between the back and the wing, and unfortunately from a distance you won't necessarily always see that. When you're looking at something, a picture or a bird out in the wild from a distance, color isn't always visible well. And so even though the common goldeneye has kind of a greenish tint to the black head, from a distance, it'll just look black. Most of your diving ducks are mostly shades of black and white. You might have some red mixed in, you might see some green tones, but for the most part, they'll mostly be black and white. You'll see on the left side, I list other features, which those are important to know, especially if you are able to see them up close. But realistically, if you're out in the field going birding, if they're far out in the water, you probably won't see a lot of these other features. You won't really see the feet. You won't see under the wing. One feature that's really helpful with seeing a diving duck versus a dabbler in the water is if you can see the tip of the tail, you might actually have a dabbling duck, because with diving ducks, their bodies are set further in the water, and so you don't see as much of their tail feathers. So moving on to the next slide. And something that Chris mentioned, I'm also focusing mostly on the males. Females, again, they're like he said, they're brown. They don't have a whole lot of features that make them distinguishable. The males are honestly a lot easier to learn how to identify, especially if you're just starting out as a birder. Gaining these abilities to ID the females, it's something that comes with experience. So here you have your canvasback and redheads. I chose to put these two species on the same slide because they are very similar, and it will be a lot easier to learn how to identify them if you can see them next to each other. So here you can see silhouettes, as we've mentioned earlier in the presentation, is incredibly important. The silhouette of the canvasback's head is more of a wedge-shaped triangular shape. The bill is thinner. So as you see the red arrow pointing to that, that's something you're going to look at in comparison. Both of these species have what you would say a red head. It's more of a brownish red, but if you're a birder, you know colors, they're not always directly a bright red. It can be shades of brown with these species in particular. Both of them have that black chest, which is important. But between these two, besides the silhouette, how you can tell them apart is the back. So as you see with the canvasback, it's just this bright white back. From a distance, it's going to be really easy to see that. Compared to a redhead, that chest will blend from black to this gray. So those are what you're going to be looking at, is the silhouette and then the back if you're looking to ID these out on the water. The redhead's other key identifying feature would be the bill. So from a distance, the canvasback's beak is going to be a nice dark black. Versus the redhead's, it's going to be this grayish blue tone with the black tip. As well as the redheads are a little stockier, so they won't be quite as majestic and thin. The canvasbacks have more of a silhouette similar to a Merganser. The redheads have more of a dabbling duck structure to their body size. So as you can see with the range maps, both of them can be found here in Michigan. They both actually overwinter here in Michigan around this time, and what's kind of cool is both of what really helps whenever you're birding with these birds is it's not uncommon for you to see them together out on the water. So if you want to, oh yeah, one other thing that actually helps is their eye color. So I mentioned with the Goldeneyes, it's not uncommon for birds to have those yellow eyes. The canvasbacks have that nice vibrant red eye. So if you are able to get close enough to see their eye color, that actually could help you as well. So moving on. So these two are probably a little bit more difficult. So I put the greater and lesser Scaups together just because it's unlikely you're going to see them in the same areas. Greater Scaups typically are more on the coastlines, so you'll see them on the Great Lakes, but you won't necessarily see them, or it'll be more unlikely to see them in the middle of the Michigan area on lakes and rivers. Versus if you do see a bird that looks like a Scaup, it's probably a lesser Scaup if you see it on lakes and rivers in the middle of the state. So that's one of your big features if you're wanting to be able to identify between the two. And in comparison for the lesser and greater Scaups versus the ringneck duck, what's kind of helpful for both of these species is they both have that black head, but it's not uncommon for most other species of duck to have black heads. They both have the yellow eyes. So again, they have a lot of similar features, but what you're going to be looking at mostly is the detailing on the wing for the identification between these species. So for the greater and lesser Scaups, you have that whole back area is kind of a shade of whitish gray. It'll have that lining on the top, but from a distance, you won't see that. Versus the ringneck duck, the back is black, and you'll have that whitish gray wing structure. So if you're looking to identify between these two, that helps. The bill is a little helpful. If you're able to see the outer line of the bill towards the face of the ringneck duck, that's helpful. It's a distinguishing feature as well. What's funny is most people for the ringneck duck, they would assume that you'd see this ringneck around it, but from a distance, you definitely can't see it. And honestly, even up close, you probably won't see this ring. But that's what it's called. For both the ringneck duck and the scaups, you could see them here in Michigan. The ringneck duck is less likely. They do migrate through and they breed in northern Michigan. But for the scaups, they also migrate through, but they are more likely to migrate, or they winter in southern Michigan. So you probably won't see them as often here in Michigan as you would see some of these others, but you could potentially see them depending on their location. So moving on to the next slide. The long-tailed duck. So it's kind of like your pintail, but their tails are significantly longer. Here I actually went into more of telling between their seasons just because their plumage changes significantly between the two seasons, between breeding and wintering. So throughout the seasons, they always have those nice long tail feathers. They're, as well as they have the dark wings. But in the winter, so when you would see them now, they have that nice white head, they have a black-brown neck, and they have a bit of a gray tone around the eye, but across both plumages, you'll actually also have this mottled looking beak, which is unusual for most of the sea ducks. And then when you're looking at the breeding season, they're more of a darker tone, which would make sense along with the females of most species. They don't want to be quite as colorful in the breeding season because they're trying to blend in with their surroundings to protect themselves from predators. So that's actually really helpful for learning to ID between the species the species in the different seasons. But in the wintering, you'll actually mostly be looking for this mottled, mixed colored bird, but it is mostly white. And you can see this bird in Michigan, but it's unlikely. It'll be mostly migrating through northern Michigan. But all right, if you want to move on to the next slide. So here are a couple of my favorite birds. They're the mergansers. So here again, I did the comparison between the common and the red-breasted mergansers. So you can see both of these species here in Michigan. The common is more of a sleek looking bird. Both of them have a black head and white neck, and they'll have that black back, which is important, but what you're realistically going to be looking for to ID between the two is the head and the chest. So for the red-breasted merganser, the head honestly looks like a mohawk. Sometimes when it is wet, that won't be quite as prominent, but if it is wet, you're going to be looking mostly at the chest, which if it's in the water, you may not necessarily see quite as much of it. But as you can see in this picture on the right, it's kind of this mottled brownish red tone in the front of the chest versus the common merganser would be white from the neck to the belly. And so that's something that you're realistically going to try and focus mostly on if you can. But again, if it's from a distance, it's going to be harder to see. Try your best, but if you need to, the head should be helpful for IDing. But yeah, so, and then what's helpful whenever they're flying is honestly, it's going to be hard to miss. They have a very unique silhouette. It's a very long bill. They have a longer neck, bigger bodied, honestly. So it's something you'll want to be focusing on is, again, the head and the neck and kind of breast area. So moving on. Hooded mergansers. So this is another favorite of mine. So mergansers as a whole, they have those thinner bill structures. With the hooded, it can be a little confusing because you'll learn on the right here, it has this nice big white crest. However, that crest is not always up. It's not always flared. You'll see in this left picture, it's actually been brought down, and so it looks more like a stripe than a crest. And so it's good to note, you'll see a white shape from the eye to the back of the neck. That's mostly what you're going to be focusing on. What's really unique about the hooded mergansers is they have brown on the sides, and most of the diving ducks do not have that brown feature on the sides, as well as it has that nice white chest area like the other mergansers. So you'll be wanting to look at these areas. For the hooded merganser, they do breed in the Upper Peninsula, so the upper parts of Michigan, and then in the Lower Peninsula, you can actually find them all year round. So if you want, and I don't know if you've noticed in some of these pictures I've had a few that are a little further away with diving ducks. As I've mentioned, they're not always going to be perfect pictures. They're going to be not always perfect images when it comes to IDing these birds. So the bufflehead looks quite similar to the hooded merganser. Between the two, honestly, would be the bill is one of the key identifying features besides the brown on the side. The bufflehead has more of a gray bill. It's a little thicker. Buffleheads are really small birds. So if you see a group of birds out on the water of a big lake and you see something small and you see a flash of white behind the head, you actually have a pretty good chance of it being a bufflehead. So that's one of the key identifying features, is from the eye to the back of the head, you'll see this kind of crest, this white section behind the eye. The black around the face, sometimes if you're able to get close, it's really pretty, has this nice iridescent tone to it. And then from the neck down through the body, it's white with a black back. And so it's going to be hard to miss. The white goes all the way around the back of the head to the other eye, and so that'll be really helpful for the buffleheads. Buffleheads they do have non-breeding grounds here in Michigan. You can see them in the winter, but yeah, it's not uncommon to see them on big open lakes. So next slide. The scoters. So we have 3 scoters, and with the black scoter, it's going to be hard to confuse with all the other birds because their body is all black. And then they have this nice orange knob on the end of their bill, or on the top of their bill. And if you can't catch the bill and you see just a fully black bird, you have a pretty good chance that it's probably a black scoter. But if you have an opportunity, try and get a good glance of that orange bill, the orange knob on the bill, because it is a very distinguishing feature. With the black scoter, though, it's not common to see it in Michigan. They overwinter on Lake Erie, but other than that, they mostly breed in Canada. So the chances of seeing them are lower, but you might still see them in the winter. So next slide. So here are your other scoters, your white-winged and your surf scoter. So with all the scoters, they are mostly black-bodied. They don't have quite as much of the prominent white on their bodies as some of your other diving ducks. With the white-winged, 2 of the areas you're going to want to look at is that nice little stripe of white on the wing, and then a white lining detail under the eye. And so with that, unfortunately, from a distance, it is going to be harder to see it because it's not a very big, prominent section of white on them. So if you have the chance, the best IDing feature would honestly be the silhouette. Their bill is very unique to them. They have that nice knob on their bill and a little bit of orangish red on the tip. But besides that, it's mostly the silhouette you'll want to use to ID them. They're mostly found along the Atlantic coasts and Pacific coast, sorry. And then, but realistically, it's unlikely you'll see them in Michigan. For the surf scoter, similar structure. Their silhouette's going to be incredibly important. The surf scoters do have the white detailing up on the forehead and then on the back of the neck. They have the white there, but the silhouette of the head is going to be important. They have that reddish orange and white with a little bit of black on their bill. Very unique towards the surf scoter. You really don't see other birds here in Michigan that have those. But otherwise, similar to the white-winged, it's unlikely you'll find them in Michigan. But if you do, maybe you might see them migrate through, but they're mostly found along the coastlines of the United States. So Next slide. Cool. So Aaron, just to verify, we're gonna have the polls, correct? Perfect. So here you have a bird. I want to see what you guys what you think it is, but before you do, I want you to focus on, like I mentioned, the head and the bill. Those are going to be some identifying features for this bird. So what do you think? So, all right. Let's see what you guys thought. Awesome, great. So just for those of you that did guess common and hooded, so the hooded again would have that nice big crest with the white on the back. The common, you have the kind of wet mohawk on the back of the head, so you do see the mohawk. It's not as prominent as that original picture. And then you can't see it too well, but in the water, you'll see that reddish brown chest area. But yeah, great job, red-breasted merganser. Next slide. All right, so what do you guys think these are? So again, I want to point out a couple of features that you can see. Around the head area is important. The color of the head, the back is also important, which is harder to see because of the wings, but you can still see the belly, so that is going to help you a little bit. So what do you think you have? All right, so what do you guys think it is? Great job. Yes, the canvasback. So again, you can't see the back too well, but the underbelly is just as vibrant white as the back would be. So next slide. All right, so again, mentioning the head areas where you're going to want to look at, but let's start the poll. All right, what do you guys think it is? Great job, guys. Yes. Black head with a nice prominent white chest area. It was going to be what distinguishes it from the red-breasted merganser. Right. Next slide. All right, here's a bit of a tricky one. So what do you guys think this is? Again, if you can move the poll over, you'll want to look at the back area is going to be what helps you ID this one. You can look around the bill. That's going to be what helps you a little bit there. All right, so let's see what you guessed. Great job, guys. Yes. And again, for those of you that guessed ringneck duck, the ringneck, you'd see a bit of white around the top part of the bill, close to the face. And then the back area, the wings, the color would be more of a white/gray around the wing, and the back would be black. So for those of you that did guess the wrong birds. So next slide. All right. So again, mentioning around the head, if you can, is going to be probably one of the best features for this bird. So what do you think it is? All right, let's see what you guessed. Awesome, guys. Yep, most of you, that was 97%. That's a pretty great guess, everyone. Awesome. Yep, it's the bufflehead. So next slide. So as I mentioned with the diving ducks, as well as even with some dabbling ducks, it's actually really great if you have an opportunity to buy binoculars, or even better, a scope, because honestly, if you're out birding on a big lake like the Great Lakes are, a scope is going to be a real help, because sometimes binoculars are just not enough. Because if you're looking at like the Detroit River, it's going to be really hard to see birds on the other side of the river unless you have a scope. But if you're looking through binoculars or a scope, here are some features that you're really going to want to focus on. And you, as you noticed, I'm sure, in most of my presentation, I tried to focus on these areas because if you have just 1 second to look at a bird flying over or a bird right before it dives into the water, these are going to be what you want to look for. The silhouette is really important around the head, the bill, and the tail. And then the color areas are mostly significant around the head and the back for the plumage. So those are some features, and I'm hoping that you have a chance to write some of these down because they're going to be what really help you around the head, the brow or eye line, the bill, cheek patches, or head crest. All of those can be important depending on the species. Plumage, again, the chest, the neck, around the neck area, the wings, tail, sometimes mostly for the Oldsquaw or the long-tailed duck, but the silhouette's also important because if it's a smaller bird, that's helpful. So size can also be important. I didn't list it here, but size can be helpful depending on the bird. For instance, like the Bufflehead versus a Merganser, the silhouettes are helpful whenever they're flying. Around the bill in particular, the slope of the head, the length of the tail and the body, honestly. But as we've mentioned throughout the presentation, male duck identification is going to be a lot easier than female identification. Female ID takes years of experience to really get good at it. But if you're good at it, awesome. That's great. Next slide. So I'm doing another mini test run. So this one is more to kind of get you used to what you might see out on a large body of water. So here I want to see how many different species of bird you see. So not the number of birds, but the number of species. So again, make sure you look around the back, around the head. Those are going to help you here, but let's see how many you guys guessed. All right. So yes, you got 3. So before we move on, let's kind of go over which ones you saw here. So yep, there we go, the Bufflehead. So that's great. Next one, that's the Scaup. Great job. And the third is the ringneck. So this kind of is great to show you the comparison between the Scaup and the ringneck duck, mostly because you can see that the ringneck, the wing area is white and then it switches right over to a black area, and that's going to be what helps you to ID between these two species. The Bufflehead is a bit of a tricky one here because it's turned at an angle where you can't see the back of the head quite as well, which isn't always going to be the case. But you can see the head area and then a bit of white behind it, and so that's a pretty good identifying feature for a Bufflehead. For those of you that are a little bit more advanced, we haven't gone over it, but sometimes in these images you will see the females, and if you aren't sure, females can sometimes help. The one to the right of the Bufflehead is a Bufflehead female, and so that could have been something that helped if you weren't sure. So next slide. All right, how many different species do you see in this image? Give you a second. Again, make sure you focus on those key areas I've been pointing out, and let's see what you think. Great job, guys. Yep, 3 species. So we'll go over again what species you have in the images. And oh, there we go. You got your Scaup, the Goldeneye, and a redhead. Great job. Yeah. So again, the Scaup is helpful. The Goldeneye, you see that nice white spot between the eye and the bill. It's not a very big one, but it's honestly going to be a really big help when you're IDing these birds. And then the redhead. Like I mentioned, from a distance, you can't always see that nice bright red head. It almost looks black, like a dark brownish black. So the red isn't always the best for helping. And then the bill is also a key identifying feature here. You have that almost grayish blue tone with a black tip. So those are what you're going to be looking at when you only have a chance to see it from a distance. So next slide. All right, so this is actually one that I took out in the field just a few weeks ago. So here, I want to see how many species you have in this image, and I will throw in a quick tip. There's more than just diving ducks in this picture. So let's see what you think. I'll give you a few extra minutes because there's a lot more birds in this image, so it might take you a second. All right, let's see what you think. Good job, guys. Yes. All right, 4 species of birds. So the first species is a mallard. So you can see him kind of standing on the ice back in that corner. Again, you won't really see those diving ducks on the ice standing. They're more in the water, but this was a pretty cold day. And so a lot of the ducks were hiding their head, and that's not uncommon if you're looking at them in the winter. They're trying to stay warm just like you are. So their heads aren't always going to be visible, so you might want to try and focus on the back in those instances. The next species of bird is a nice hidden bufflehead. So this is a little bit better than that last image. You can actually see that white underbelly and then the white around the back of the head. So that one's really helpful. You got a red head, and then the next one is a canvasback. And so with this image, I mentioned earlier, it's not uncommon to see redheads and canvasbacks together. And this is a perfect image of that. The white canvasbacks, you'll be able to see that nice prominent white back. And then with the redheads, you'll see more of a gray tone. So throughout the images, that's really going to be what helps you between these 2 species. So next slide. And that's all from me.
Thanks so much, Brittany, and thanks everyone for participating in those polls. You all did such a great job. I wanted to chat with you all about where the best places are in Michigan to go watching waterfowl. So first off on our list is Michigan's important bird areas. Michigan is actually home to over 100 important bird areas, and they are either state level recognized or globally recognized. Important bird areas. So the red areas are those areas that are globally recognized, and the green areas on the map are those that are state recognized. So these important bird areas, many of them double as state wildlife or game areas, state park and rec areas, and are open to the public. These important bird areas also help support either a great number of birds during either the breeding season, migration, or wintering season, or they are supporting birds that rely on a particular type of habitat, which causes them to be found only in restricted areas. But it's also home to species that are usually sensitive species or species of conservation concern. Those are all the kind of characteristics of important bird areas. And there are different reasons and different species that each area has been designated as an IBA. We also recommend you visit Michigan's Wetland Wonders, and these are all managed waterfowl hunt areas, but they are open to the public outside of the hunting season, and we welcome you to visit them. And nearly all of these state game and wildlife areas double as important bird areas. So on this map, you can see Muskegon County Wastewater, Allegan State Game Area, Shiawassee River State Game Area, Fish Point State Wildlife Area, and Nyanquin Point State Wildlife Area. Those 2 are up in the Saginaw Bay. And then St. Clair Flat State Wildlife Area and Point Mouillet State Game Area down in Southeast Michigan. I also wanted to highlight that Michigan is also home to 9 birding trails. Now, most of these are in the Northern Lower Peninsula and the UP, but a lot of them include state game and wildlife areas, as well as important bird areas where you a great variety of birds. And with that, I'm going to pass things over to Chris, who's going to chat with you about the status of Michigan's wetlands and why they're important for our waterfowl.
Thank you, Erin. So regardless of what kind of duck you're looking for across the state, they all need wetlands. these habitats, whether they be a marsh, whether they be a swamp, whether they be a shallow lake, these things are hugely important for life of all sorts. In fact, more than 900 species of plants and animals rely on wetlands at some point in their life cycle to survive. So how are we doing in Michigan? Great, not great actually. We've lost over 50% of our historical wetlands. And by lost, I mean they have been drained or damaged or severely degraded because of human development, whether it be houses, buildings, farms, whatever it might be. This map here shows you where most of those things are happening. Unfortunately, as is evident by that red, our coastal wetland habitats have really been attacked in Southeast Michigan. It's where a lot of us live, right? So the problem with that is that's a major corridor from that Saginaw Bay, the Detroit River, the St. Clair River, down to Lake Erie, for not just ducks, but also many different species of migrating birds. So we've lost over half of them here. Across the Great Lakes, we're actually about 60% of those that are lost, and we're losing about 1% annually as well. Still the current estimates. The majority of those losses, as in Michigan here, as you see, occur in areas that are extremely important to ducks. So 90% of those losses actually occur in heavy waterfowl areas. So that's pretty bad. Something to keep in mind from this past year or two in the Great Lakes, you've been hearing a lot about high water levels. And this is important because a lot of us might think, well, there's more water, there's gonna be more wetlands, right? Better for the ducks. That's not necessarily true anymore, because the role of the wetland habitats, before humans came in and developed the land, was to stretch and shrink with the water levels. So if the water levels of the Great Lakes went up one year, then the marshes and swamps would move inland. Well, now the water levels go up and they are reaching houses and roads. There's no spots for these wetland habitats to go any longer. So we're actually seeing reduced wetlands in some areas with the high water levels. So that is some threats to duck habitat everywhere. So what do we do about that? Next slide, Aaron. Conservation. It's on my license plate actually. So Ducks Unlimited, we are the world's largest wetlands and waterfowl conservation group. But we partner with Audubon, with the DNR, with land conservancies, with local and state organizations to put this habitat back on the ground. Here's just a couple of numbers here from this past year. In Michigan alone, we've done 1,000 acres of conservation, but historically we've done 87,000 acres of conservation in Michigan, and over 500,000 acres in the Great Lakes. I bring this up because keeping this habitat around for ducks, whether you want to go see them or hunt them or just hike or kayak, it's expensive and it takes a lot of partners. So we really appreciate that support to do that. And I wanted to show you here, and let's go next slide, to a couple of spots that we've worked on recently. These dots, by the way, are all Ducks Unlimited projects. Those are all DU sites across Michigan that we've worked at to keep habitat on the ground for ducks. A couple sites here that you might want to think about visiting if you haven't done so yet. At the very top of the UP there, Sturgeon River Sloughs State Wildlife Area. It's a 9,000 acre managed marsh area. DU and the Michigan DNR recently enhanced all the infrastructure that's needed there to keep the water levels where they should be. And as you see with the teal, blue on that picture, a lot of ducks breeding up there in Canada rely on habitats in that part of the state to rest on their migration route. Mid part of the state, Manistee Marsh. This is a 4,000 acre coastal wetland. It's actually part of the Manistee River State Game Area. As that picture shows there, it's a beautiful site. It was drained in the 1900s for farming purposes. The Michigan DNR eventually acquired it, and then we've helped them over the last couple of years to replace the infrastructure there to make the marsh look the way it does there, which is going to be great for species of all types and all shapes and sizes. Next spot. Further down here, these are right in the heart of those red areas that we saw on that map before, right? That are heavily degraded, heavily drained areas. The Shiawassee National Wildlife Refuge. This is a gorgeous spot. If you folks haven't been there yet, to go see some birds, they've got a great wildlife drive that you can go through and stop and see ducks and really take in what they do in their natural habitat. I'm highlighting this one not just because it's a great spot for birding, but it also shows the importance of wetlands to people, to us as well. So back last year when those dams broke in Michigan and we had some pretty bad flooding in the mid part of the state, this rush of water was coming toward Saginaw, coming toward Shiawassee, and we had just got done restoring, DU did, 1,000-acre chunk of that wetland. So the refuge managers opened up the floodgates, literally opened up the floodgates, and that full 1,000 acres took on 10 feet of water throughout the whole site and actually helped to reduce flooding in the nearby areas. So that's huge. I mean, that's what wetlands do. They're a big sponge and they soak up water for wildlife, but also for people as well. So having those things on the ground is important. And then the southeast Michigan there and in Monroe County, Point Moulier State Game Area, this is one of the largest freshwater marshes in North America. It's a great site. That's an aerial view you see there. It tracks everything, dabblers, divers, you name it. That comes right through there. It's also a great spot for shorebirds and eagles and other things like that. So these are just a handful of different sites that we've worked on throughout the state that I really encourage you to go see. And then if you go to the next slide, Aaron, I encourage you to go here, ducks.org/flydu. Here we've taken just a kind of a highlight of about 25 project sites, conservation sites that we've done over the last couple of years that Ducks Unlimited has done. We've done it, taken drone flights from there. So you actually get a duck's eye view of these marshes and these properties to actually give you an idea of what birds see when they're coming into there and what makes them, attractive to people. And it gives you some more spots to go bird if you haven't been there yet. So I highly encourage you to go check them out. And next slide.
Great, thanks, Chris. And I wanted to share too, one of Audubon's newer projects. We were awarded a DNR Wildlife Habitat Grant, and we're going to be doing some similar wetlands enhancements work that DU has been doing on other properties as well to create openings, create more of a hemi-marsh where we have partially open water mixed with emergent vegetation, which really could increase use of this wetland by waterfowl, but also secretive marsh birds, which are not doing so well here in the state of Michigan and across the region. So we're going to be conducting waterfowl and marsh bird surveys as part of this project and have some community scientists already recruited for that effort. We're really excited about that work and look forward to seeing how the birds respond and who comes back to the area. And with that, I'll pass it back over.
So what can we all do, right, as birders, as hunters, as outdoors enthusiasts? What can we do to keep wetlands and waterfowl healthy for us throughout the year? There's actually a number of things you can do. So buying the migratory bird hunting conservation stamp, called the duck stamp for short. The duck stamp comes out every year. It's $25. And this is a direct way that you can actually contribute toward the health of our wetland habitats nationwide. You can get these online, like I said, or from the post office. And this money goes to help to acquire and restore our national wildlife refuges, like Shiawassee that we just mentioned. So those are great. You can buy them every year. They're beautiful artwork too. I have a collection of them. When you're done with them for the year, you can just keep them and make a nice collection from them. The next thing you can do is license plates. As you see there, the Ducks Unlimited, DNR Wildlife, other organizations have license plates they can actually use to give a portion of that money toward that organization. DU has raised several $100,000 already from these plates from our supporters and our members. And this all goes to projects directly here in the state. So if you want to help projects right here in Michigan, that's a great way to stay local. Join or donate to conservation groups like Ducks Unlimited. As I mentioned, all those dots you saw on that map of projects that we've done and that we partner with the DNR with and the Audubon on, they all take a lot of money, honestly. So the money we take from the money that we get from our membership, we use it as a match to go out and get huge federal and state grants that actually takes to get these jobs done. So without members, we wouldn't have the seed money to get those grants to do these great project sites across the state. So joining groups like that are important. Informing your state and federal legislators. So policy, I won't get into, of course, any politics here, but working with your lawmakers to educate them to the importance of wetlands and conservation, that's crucial. Wetlands are continuously under threat from development and from laws. DU can spend millions of dollars to go out and restore wetlands every year, but with the stroke of a pen, the legislator's pen, you can either threaten or incentivize people to keep these things on the ground. So you keep your legislators in the loop and keep them informed as to how important it is to you. Oftentimes, Ducks Unlimited members, we will send out alerts to our membership telling them, hey, there's a bill in the state house that might be threatening some of these habitats. Talk to your senator or your representative. So it's important to us, and that's a great way that you as a birder can do your part as well.
Thanks, Chris. And yeah, you can also follow Detroit Audubon and Audubon Great Lakes for potential advocacy efforts as well. We're also really happy to encourage you all to participate in community science and stewardship. There was a recent study that was done that showed stewardship plays a really critical role in successful conservation. So doing things like removing invasive plant species or helping to plant native species in an area, or going out to monitor birds. These things all really make a difference and contribute greatly to bird conservation. We also wanted to highlight that the Great Backyard Bird Count starts today. So if you have not done that in the past, this is a great time to get involved in this global bird count. You can learn more at the link in the chat box on how you can get involved, and it requires just 15 minutes of time, or you can bird all weekend, either at a natural area near you or from the comfort of your own home, looking at your backyard birds. I also wanted to encourage you all to stay in touch. You can follow Detroit Audubon for more information on upcoming guided birding tours. You can follow River Raisin Institute to learn more about upcoming programs and stewardship events. And you can continue to follow Ducks Unlimited if you're interested in learning more about wetlands conservation in Michigan. And you can follow My Birds as well to learn more about upcoming community science efforts and stewardship days near you across the state. With that, I'd like to thank you all again for joining us and sticking it out for more than an hour. And we're going to open up the floor now for Q&A. Sarah, I'll pass things over to you.
Right. Well, we have quite a few questions and a lot of great comments too in the chat. Thank you. I've been trying to answer questions as I know them, but hopefully we can get through a few of these in the next 7 minutes or so. The first one that I had that I just was wanting to make sure is that will we be sending out a copy of the slides to folks that are registered?
Yeah, so we'll be getting the recording up on YouTube and our website after today's webinar is over, and we'll follow up with you via email with a link to that YouTube recording.
Great. Okay, one of the first questions that I didn't know, if any of you know, is there a young birders resource for waterfowl, like some of the resources on Audubon for Kids?
That's a good question. Chris, do you have anything like that?
So we have a Green Wings youth membership program that we do that encourages just what it says, young kids to get involved in conservation and birding. And that can be found on our website, ducks.org. Again, it's the Green Wings program. And it really encourages kids to learn early on the importance of waterfowl in the wetlands. And we've got, for members who join that, we've got coloring books, newsletters, things like that we can offer.
Great, thank you. And I think a lot of our organizations do have young birders and other things, but I looked on the Audubon for Kids and they didn't have one specific for waterfowl. So that's some ideas for that. Another question, there's a few questions from people seeing different birds and whether they were IDing them correctly. So someone saw what they thought was a group of mallards on the river in mid-Michigan and based on their green heads, but they were surprised because several of them submerged for up to a minute at a time. Is this an occasional behavior or was it not a mallard?
So when I'm wondering if they say when they've submerged for a minute, like fully submerged, I would take it as opposed to just having their head in the water and their rumps in the air. Trying to think of some other diving ducks, as we've mentioned, some of those scaups can have a slight green iridescence to their head that could be mistaken for a mallard, potentially at a distance that would dive in search of food.
Of it too, and forgive me, Brittany, if you mentioned this, but true diver ducks, they don't just go down and come back up. Diver ducks will often go down and follow their food prey that they're looking for, halfway across their lake sometimes. So we've all seen diver ducks go down and pop up a pretty good distance away from where they went down. So if you're seeing ducks that went down and came right back up again, there's a better chance it might be a dabbler. Because again, they can dive, they prefer not to, but if some of that submerged aquatic vegetation that they want is beneath them just a little bit, then they will go down and get that and come back up again. So it could have been a mallard, is my point.
Great, thank you. Let's see, another good question is how much interaction is there between duck species? I know we saw in some of the pictures, but are they social with each other?
I can just start out and say that, they're social to the point that they're all looking for the same thing, right? They're looking for good habitat to rest, feed, breed, whatever it might be. So in some spots, you might see several species together because there might not be a lot of wetlands to choose from in that area. But if it's a great spot that has a great source of food, then yeah, you will see dabblers, working together. And I wouldn't say working together, I would say mingling together, if you will.
Great, thank you.
Diving ducks will be seen congregating because we have so much ice out on the water. Any available open pocket of water will really bring all those ducks together in a large congregation or raft. So it's another kind of fun time to go out if it's not too cold or everything isn't completely covered in ice that's in your view, because you stand a chance of seeing a lot of birds congregated together.
Definitely. Someone else asked if we could talk more about the bills of dabblers. Do they all have a way of filtering like the shovelers?
That's more of unique to the shovelers. And I'll be honest with you, I don't fully know in all of them if they can all filter, but I can tell you that they are specialized for going after the type of vegetation that they need. So a lot of times it's, if you look at the wood duck, for example, they're eating acorns, so they're not filtering those, of course. So yeah, for the most part, the shovelers are pretty unique in that aspect.
Thank you. Someone else said that they know there's common names for these ducks that old timers use. Can you mention some of those names? For instance, which duck is known as bills? If we know that.
So bills, so the one thing I can think of is bluebills. A lot of times, waterfowlers will call them bluebills. Those are often referred to as scaup. Scaup are called bluebills. I'm not sure what else, if anybody else can help me out with just the general bills. I'm not familiar with that one.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that one either, but I kind of put in my presentation if they had another name. For instance, the long-tailed duck used to be called the Oldsquaw. And so it's not uncommon for birds to have older names.
Yeah, I only knew bluebill as well. I'm not familiar with just bills.
I guess we're not old timers then. So we did have a few questions just to, it's 1:30, but there were a few questions about scopes. about the best place to buy a scope, if we have any recommendations for strength. Someone did say they tried an Athlon, but it wasn't good. So maybe we can close with that for folks that are maybe wanting to head out.
Well, I know that if you have a nearby Wild Birds Unlimited, they do usually try to buy the better binoculars. So that could be a place to get it, especially because there's such a large variety online. You want higher resolutions because, I mean, the lower resolutions won't do you much good if you're looking for a bird across the lake. So resolution's important to pay attention to, but again, like if you aren't true yourself, I know a lot of Wild Birds Unlimiteds usually do provide a nice variety for you to choose from.
I wanted to mention also that Audubon has a guide to binoculars and a guide to scopes online
that fit a variety of budgets and a variety of weights, because I know some scopes are really heavy, and I went out looking for one that's really lightweight because of the field trips I used to lead. It's really helpful to have something that you can hike in and out with you and not risk, you know, having it break off the base of your scope, your tripod. So I will make sure that we send those resources out to you as well in our follow-up email.
All right, it is 1:30, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I know we will keep the chat, so we have a lot of great questions here. If there's anything, or you have our contact info, I believe, at least Aaron's. If anyone had any really questions that we didn't get to, I apologize. But it was a really great active group, and thank you all for coming today.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.